Justice Watchers, before we begin, I want to make this absolutely clear. The following broadcast contains public domain courtroom footage, commentary, and legal analysis. This content is presented under the Fair Use Doctrine as defined by 17 U.S.C. 107 and is protected by multiple Supreme Court rulings, which you see below. This stream is transformative, educational, and journalistic in nature. It includes original commentary, trial breakdowns, legal interpretation, and critical analysis, not raw redistribution. We do not claim ownership over any public domain footage, and all use is strictly within legal bounds. If you're watching this content, you're engaging in a protected, transformative experience, grounded in law, never in speculation. And if anyone has a problem with that, take it up with Campbell, Brady, Miranda, and Irvin. Remember, guys, justice always works better when we watch. So keep watching. See you in the courtroom.
We were in the middle of your testimony yesterday when we broke for the day. So I'd like to resume that. We were going through the suspects that you had laid out in your prior testimony. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. And the last suspect that we had wrapped up with was Michael Van. Do you recall that?
I do.
Okay. And prior to that, we had discussed Ms. Rice and Tyler Schmalz. Do you remember that?
I do.
Okay. Now, just a couple things regarding Ms. Rice. You were present in the courtroom for Sergeant Asham's testimony, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you were present regarding her testimony that had to do with Nichole's interviews?
Yes.
Now, there's an interview from March 12th, 2022. Can you tell me a little bit about your takeaway from that interview?
That was the interview conducted in conjunction with the cold justice investigators.
Okay. Were there any, and we had previously discussed the read tactics. Were that used in this interview?
Yes, that's the same one.
Can you explain that again?
So read is a school of thought of interviewing. It's designed in a way that you ask questions to get a specific response, and those responses can
Your Honor, I need to object at this point. There's been no foundation to qualify the witness as an expert in interrogation, specifically the read technique, just in investigations. Those are two very different fields.
A little late, Mr. Nelson. He already talked about it at 4:15 yesterday, so he may continue to answer, but you've already covered it, Mr. Sands, so can you move on?
Sure. Thank you, Your Honor. Now, you had testified previously that Sergeant Asham took the stand and stated that she wasn't familiar with the entire file. Do you remember saying that?
It did not seem to me she was familiar with the file.
Okay. Now, in this particular interview from March 12th, there's some statements regarding a bowl in the sink. Do you recall that?
I do.
In your expert opinion, can you state to the court what your takeaway was from that portion of the interview?
The bowl in the sink with the dirty water was present when Nichole was walked through the apartment.
Okay, and there's been some testimony about withholding. What is withholding?
So withholding is intentionally not releasing information about a case so that it can be used to possibly identify those responsible.
Now, there's been a lot of testimony and things presented by the state about withholding, particularly the body, the knife, the stabbing, the bowl. What's your takeaway after reviewing this interview regarding the withholdings?
Well, the bowl, for sure, is not something that would have been unknown to her because she saw it there when she was brought in to see if anything was missing from the apartment.
Is this something that Case Agent Asham, do you think, should have known before taking the stand?
I would think so. I mean, when you're the case agent, you got to know your case inside and out. It doesn't matter if you're splitting up responsibilities with another investigator. You know, you may split it up. I'm going to do these 6 interviews. You do these 6 interviews. But you've got to know your whole case. You've got to have a firm grasp of what you have there. If someone lies to you, how are you going to call them out on that if you're not aware of the entirety? And I'll leave it at that.
Well, it's interesting you bring up lying. There's been a lot of testimony about Nichole's inconsistencies. Do you recall hearing about that?
I do.
Especially about the timeline regarding the weekend of the murder.
Yes.
Can you please, in your expert opinion, explain to the court your expert opinion regarding the inconsistencies in that timeline?
So yes, I agree, as I said before, that there are inconsistencies. However, I feel they are irrelevant. So it boils down to she is in pocket by someone all day until about 11:30 after watching a movie with her cousin. Now, at that point, she states she goes home, sleeps on the couch, and the next thing is that she encounters her father early the next morning. So we know from the phone records that Anita was likely killed somewhere around 5 o'clock on Sunday morning the 3rd. Getting my dates mixed up here. Would be Saturday the 3rd, and the screen was found around 7:30 that same morning. So Nichole would have had to have gotten up 4:30 to get from Velva to Minot, undetected by anybody else that's in the house, commit the murder, clean up, get back home, again undetected, get back to sleep on the couch, wake up, spend the rest of the day as if nothing happened, going out on the four-wheelers, checking on the cattle, shooting gophers, whatever they did that day. And I just don't buy that.
And I apologize. In your answer, you said that you got a little confused about the days. I think it was Saturday and Sunday. Could you clear that up for the court just to make sure that we have a clear record?
Yeah, so it's Saturday the 3rd.
Are you sure about that?
I'm sorry. No, I'm not. It's Saturday is the 2nd, Sunday is the 3rd.
Okay,
Sorry.
and so that being said, and Your Honor, I apologize, I don't want it to be asked and answered, but given the fact that now it's Saturday is the 2nd, Sunday is the 3rd, can you please, this is important, can you please state again your position on any inconsistencies in the timeline?
So again, the inconsistencies are all prior to the time in question. And the Saturday, starting at the home in Velva, going to the family event in Sykeston, going to the bar in Russo, going to the cousin's house to watch a movie, possibly once back and forth to the home in Velva to get cheese dip, and then back to the home. That all occurs Saturday. And so it's after 11:30 up until the point of the murder that's in question.
And in investigating this case, to the best of your personal knowledge, you testified about Nichole's parents' home, you testified about the bar and grill in Russo, you testified about the cousin's house where they watched the movie. How close in proximity are these places to each other?
It seems, from looking at a map, that from Velva to Sykeston is quite a ways. I don't know how long it takes to get there, but
and that's where the party was.
Yes,
on Saturday.
The going away party for the cousin heading off to Iraq. I think it's an hour and a half, 2-hour drive from there, and then back to Russo. That's another long drive, and I believe Russo is pretty close to Velva, is my understanding.
Okay. And as far as where she watched the movie and her parents' house?
My understanding it's about a 5-minute ride.
Now, the state has challenged your credibility quite a few times as an expert. That being said, how many crime scenes in your career as an FBI agent would you say you've processed?
I'm going to take a stab here, 20 to 30.
Okay. Now, there's been some testimony in this case, testimony by Sergeant Asham, when you were here regarding whether or not this break-in included a robbery. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Now, you recall Sergeant Asham testifying about Nichole doing an inventory of her own items, correct?
Correct.
Now, if items were stolen from Anita's room, who would be the best person to tell law enforcement what was missing?
Anita would if she were available.
And what type of items, in your expert opinion, you just said that you processed, a couple dozen crime scenes. What type of items would you be looking for to be missing?
Money, jewelry, other valuables, anything really, just anything. Obviously, a TV, something that could be resold. Could be anything.
Now, the smaller stuff like cash and jewelry, and I don't mean small in value, I mean small in actual physical size. Is that something that you think Nichole would know?
I don't think so.
One more question regarding Ms. Rice. You had testified earlier that it was not impossible to rule her out as a suspect. Can you please elaborate to the court what you meant by that?
So it's not impossible. So we can't, nobody has eyes on her between 11:30 to, I think, about 8 o'clock the next morning. So her account that she went home, went to sleep, next thing she recalls is encountering her father who was up. So it's during those hours that you don't know for sure where she was at. We don't have the CSLI, the cell site location information that puts her phone anywhere. Now, just because the CSLI puts the phone somewhere doesn't mean the person's with the phone, but it's a good indication. And was it moving? Was it bouncing from tower to tower? But we don't have that. So I can't say where she was for sure, so it's not impossible.
Is it fair to say that, given your testimony regarding the timeline of events that weekend, that it's improbable, if not highly improbable?
Yes.
Now, I'd like to move back to your list. Like I said, we had gone through Nichole Rice, we had gone through Tyler Smalls, we had gone through Michael Van. There were two more names on your list, the next person being Marty Annell. Do you recall that?
I do.
Okay, tell me what you learned about Marty Annell through your investigation in this case. Marty
was the property maintenance man and was in a relationship with the property manager, Laura Knapp. He is the person who found the screen window knocked out of the frame, took it back to his shop for repair, found it while making rounds on a Sunday morning between 7 and 7:30, according to his statement.
What are your thoughts about rounding on Sunday morning?
It seems awfully early on a Sunday morning to be doing rounds, routine work.
As an investigator, what are your thoughts about a maintenance man finding a screen off of the window, curtain rods off of the window, and then throwing the rods back into the apartment?
I find it odd that more wasn't done to find out if something was wrong.
Why is that?
If I see a window broken out of the frame, maybe it's because I'm an investigator, but I'm automatically thinking break-in. And by the account that I read, he tossed the curtain rod and the curtain that was laying there with it through the open window. And I don't recall if he hollered in or anything, but didn't notice the body that was probably within arm's reach of him at that point, and just takes it off to a shop to repair. I find that unusual.
Now, you mentioned the screen, and there's been some testimony from that in the state's case in chief that there was DNA found on the screen. It's their position that DNA was transferred from the knife. Be that as it may, as far as DNA being on the screen, can you please, in your expert opinion, explain to the court what your thoughts are on that?
So it could have come from the knife post-mortem. Clearly, it got there post-mortem because it was Anita's, but it didn't have to come from the knife. I think whoever did this came in through an unlocked door, turned it behind them, committed the act, cut the window, tried to climb through, maybe got an elbow or a foot caught on it, and pulled it the rest of the way out, and then fled. It doesn't make sense, if you're going to stage a crime scene, that you will cut it and then proceed to knock it out. Why would you do that?
Now, you testified about the door. Are you 100% certain that somebody came in through the door? Is there a possible other entrance?
No, I'm not 100% certain. They could have come through that window. It is possible to do.
Okay. Now, as far as the the door goes, what does entrance through the door tell you about this case?
Entrance through the door tells me that they either had a key or it was unlocked or she let them in.
Any possibility of picking lock or anything like that?
Or it could have been picked, or there could have been a key under the mat, or somebody could have been given a key that we don't know about. We just don't know is the short answer.
And Marty and Nell had a key, correct?
He did.
Okay. And you testified that you reviewed the interviews of Laura Knapp in this case, correct?
Yes.
After reviewing those interviews, did you learn anything about the doorknob?
So when Anita's father came and was trying to get her attention, I have to believe that he checked to see if the door was locked, although that's not clear. He went to get the property manager to help him, who had a key, and she was able to get the door open. But there, in her statement, it's still not clear. She didn't check to see if it was unlocked before she put the key in. Now, it's a deadbolt, which is not integrated with the actual handle, which does not have a lock on it. So you can put the key in and turn it, but it could already be unlocked. Again, I just don't know. My point is it's possible that it was unlocked.
Excuse me.
I think it probably was locked, but again, I can't say for sure.
And during your review of the case, you had an opportunity to review the reenactment that police conducted, correct?
Yes.
What did you notice in that reenactment?
And you're not talking about the Spingola reenactment, right?
No, I'm talking about the reenactment by Minot Police, where they went in and out of the court scene, where they went in and out of the screen. There was a couple detectives, and then they had a female staff member help them with it.
Correct. Yeah, it's possible to do. And, you know, there is debris under there, but also, as stated and in the pictures, you can see the bed is right there. You don't have to touch the floor to get in there.
And we're going to get into Devon Hall in a little bit, but after reviewing the case, it sounds like Devon Hall's a professional break-in guy. Is this something that would be difficult for somebody like him?
Hard to say. It's hard to say that he's a professional. As the prosecution stated, he's not real good at it. He gets caught. But, you know, he was a young guy at the time. I think it's definitely a possibility.
Now, what did you learn about Marty and Nell's personal life after reviewing the case?
He had issues in his personal life, reported to be an alcoholic, had been in and out of jail, some minor drug use, relationship issues. It was reported that he was never the same after Anita died. He had a collection of knives that he kept in a box. And at one point, he told his best friend, Vern Olson, that he had done something really bad, but didn't elaborate on that. And it was the next day that he killed himself.
And it's fair to say, after reviewing the file, that Marty said that he was never the same after Anita's death?
That's what he told Vern Olson in the audio that I listened to.
Now, Sergeant Asham had also testified that Marty had no means to commit this crime. What are your thoughts on that statement?
Can you repeat, please?
Yes, Sergeant Asham had testified earlier that Marty Annell had no means to commit this crime. What are your thoughts on that statement?
I'm not even sure what that means.
Okay. As an investigator, do you think that Marty had the ability and the access to be in that apartment?
Yes.
Now, moving on to the final suspect that you had mentioned, Mr. Hall. What did you learn about Devon Hall in your course of reviewing this case?
So Devon Hall arrived in Minot on June 2nd. There's some dispute on that, but by everything that I've reviewed, it's my assertion that he arrived in Minot on or before June 2nd.
Okay. Now, you testified that there's been testimony about June 2nd. Do you mean that there's been testimony that he arrived the following day?
Yes.
Okay. Why do you think that he arrived on June 2nd or earlier?
Well, he said so in his first interview, and then later changed it to, well, it was the second or third, and then later changed it to, well, it was the third or the fourth. I reviewed documents and listened to testimony that Nova Wetsit, I believe his aunt, said no, it was on the third and provided a video in support of that. However, the time stamp on that video is, I believe, January 1st of 2000. So the date had not been set. There's nothing to indicate on that video what the date was that it was recorded. And the copy that I read is a digital copy of an analog tape. So it was VHS, it's been converted into digital. There's no metadata, there's nothing to authenticate the date of that. Now I've scoured that video for any kind of clues of when it could have been taken. You know, somebody holding a doc in a newspaper or anything. You know, the print would be awfully fine, but I didn't see anything.
And this video is from the train station?
This is from this train station.
And isn't it true in the video that never shows Devon Hall getting off the train on
Objection on leading.
Overruled.
So the video shows a group of people walking from the train, but I never see him getting off of the train. So I see a group of young men, actually a lot of people, and within that group of a lot of people, this group that she seems to be focused on, and the camera is not very good. It's all over the place. I believe that's him walking away, but I don't know if he got off the train or if he met those people and is now walking to gather with his family.
And you had an opportunity during the case, or during the course of your investigation in this case, to review the train records, correct?
I did.
Do you remember them verbatim, or would it help you if I refresh your recollection?
I'll look at it.
Your Honor,
That's not the way it works. Ask him the question, Mr.
Sure,
Singh.
Your Honor. Do you recall looking at the train records?
I do.
Do you remember them verbatim?
No.
Still not the way to ask the question. He doesn't remember them verbatim. Do you have a question about the train records?
Sure, Your Honor.
Ask it.
After reviewing the train records, do you recall the dates that are on those train records?
There's a variety of dates, one of which is June 2nd and June 3rd.
Okay, on June 2nd, do you see Devon Hall's name on the train records?
I do not.
Do you see other people's names from his group on those train records?
I do.
Do you recall those names?
Jaron Vivier, Nova Wetsit. I believe there's a couple others, but I don't recall.
Now, that's not 100% what I'm seeing. Would it refresh your recollection if I showed you a copy?
It would.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Did that refresh your recollection?
It did.
Couns? You had stated that you had seen Jaron Vivier on these records. Isn't it true that he's on these records in May, correct?
Correct.
He's not on the train in June, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, he's at the very top, and that's a different date.
And after looking at this, is it fair to say, or did you see Devon Hall's name on these?
I did not.
Okay. And did you see anybody's name that you recognized?
I did.
And who's that?
There's a couple of Wetsits on there. I believe there's a Romero that I recognized. I feel like he was one of their friends or family, but I can't recall for sure.
And those two individuals were on the June 2nd train,
Correct.
which is Saturday.
Correct.
And there's been testimony that Anita wasn't killed until the early hours of Sunday morning, correct?
Correct.
So that would give that group time to get to Minot.
It would.
Whether or not Devon Hall's name's on this, if he was traveling with that group, he would have been in Minot by the 2nd.
Correct.
There's been some testimony about Mr. Hall's arrest in Minot a number of days after Anita's murder. Do you recall that?
I do.
Did you look into that at all in your review of the case file?
Yes, I did.
And what are your thoughts on that?
So on June 11th, Mr. Hall was arrested. He had broken into an apartment through the window and attempted to sexually assault a woman there. She cried out. Her boyfriend came running in, chased him back out of that window. A fight ensued. He ran away again, entered yet another apartment in the same complex, and was ultimately caught hiding in a closet with a steak knife in his back pocket.
Was he taken to jail after that?
He was.
In your review of the file, did you find anything about jail calls?
I did.
What did you find out about that?
Several jail calls were recorded to family members. I believe there were 2 family members on one call, and then there was a separate call. In both instances, he claimed the knife as his own, and not just any knife. He said that was his knife.
Now, during a review of the file, have you had an opportunity to look at photos of the murder weapon, the knife in this case?
I have.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Now, Agent Couns, I'm going to put, am I getting picked up here? Thank you. Now, Agent Couns, I'm going to show you a couple photographs that have already been entered into evidence in this case. They're State's Exhibit 7I and 7J. Can you please take a look at those for me and then let me know when you've had a chance to review them?
Yes, I've seen these.
Can you please explain to me what I just put?
This is the murder weapon, the knife that killed Anita.
Okay. And is this the knife that Devon Hall identified as being in his possession?
He did, and it's very identifiable in that it's missing the emblem on the other side. So I know a lot of these knives were made, a lot of them were sold. I don't know how many were sold in the state of North Dakota or Montana, and I don't know how many of them would be missing exactly the same medallion that he agreed was missing from his own knife. So this is the knife that Devon claimed was his.
And I'll keep those up there with you. Is the missing medallion the only thing that's unique about the state of this knife?
No.
What
I mean,
else?
it's pretty, I've never seen one like it until this case. It's a folding pocket knife. It's fairly large. It's got a decorative handle. It's kind of copper colored. There's very many things that are unique about this knife.
Now, Sergeant Asham had testified that this is a very common knife. What, in your experience as an investigator, what is the coincidence of something like this, the missing medallion, knife being used in a murder, and then another person possessing the same type of knife that had a missing medallion in a case like this?
Astronomical.
Can I have those back, please? Agent Couns, can you describe, well, first of all, have you seen photographs of Devon Hall?
I have.
Can you describe him to the court?
He's over 6 foot tall. I think 6'2", 6'3", maybe at most 6'2", I believe. 200 plus pounds. At the time, well, can you specifically now or then?
At the time.
At the time, he looks fit, about 200 pounds, 6'2", short hair, dark hair. I don't know what color his eyes are. It matches the description given by Becky Ehrman of a person that she saw running away from the scene that night.
Now, I had asked you if you'd seen photographs. Have you also reviewed descriptions of Devon Hall in the case file and reports and such?
I have.
Now, you mentioned Becky Ehrman. There's been testimony about Ms. Ehrman seeing a man running away from the scene with what could have been a bloodied shirt, a dirtied shirt.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
Again, highly coincidental that a person matching the description almost to a T of Devon Hall seen running away from the area of the crime scene with a dirty or bloody shirt is something I, as an investigator, am going to thoroughly pursue.
Now, there's been some testimony presented by the state about the criminal history of Devon Hall. Did you have a chance to look into that?
I have.
What can you tell the court?
Since Anita's death, he has been convicted of 4 counts of similar crimes on 3 separate incidences.
And what types of crimes are those?
Breaking into apartments and sexually assaulting women or attempting to.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier that when he was arrested in Minot, he was found with a knife.
Yes.
And
different knife, but a knife, yep.
Sure. Given everything that you reviewed in this case, well, strike that. I'm going to come back, Your Honor. What law enforcement agencies were involved in the investigation in this case?
Multiple. There was the Minot PD, the North Dakota BCI, tribal law enforcement, and federal law enforcement, the FBI.
The FBI?
Correct.
What was the FBI's involvement in this case?
FBI was mostly a consulting role. Materials were provided to the Behavioral Analysis Unit, which are commonly known as profilers. They were looking for assistance in identifying who might be responsible for this.
Did they have any suggestions?
They did.
What was that?
They felt the strongest suspect in this case was Devon Hall.
This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
It is.
Now, you might be a little biased towards the FBI, obviously spending 22 years there, but what type of weight did you garner from that when you read that in the case file?
A lot. In addition to their assessment, it was my own assessment as well, independently.
So just to follow up on that, in your expert opinion, what is Devon Hall's connection to this case?
I believe he's the most likely suspect, in my opinion, and if I were investigating this, I would tie down a lot of these loose ends that they've left open. And
you had testified earlier that this was not one of the 4 suspects that, when the investigation was reopened with Cole Justice and they were assisting Sergeant Asham, he was not on the list.
He was not on the list, and I was dumbfounded as to why isn't the person that appears to me as the strongest suspect not even visited in this show.
How would you rate the overall investigation in this case?
I hate to be critical, but not very good.
Why is that?
There's a lack of attention to detail. There's a lack of thoroughness. They seem to spend a lot of attention running down dead-end rabbit holes while glossing over some very important facts, details.
What, if anything, about this case piques your interest?
I don't think we have the correct person being charged, in my opinion, and being a law enforcement background and a person that investigates for a living, I would like, if given the opportunity, I would like to investigate this further. There's a lot more work to do.
Questions I have, Your Honor. Thank you very much, Agent Couns.
Which one? Mr. Nelson, do you have any cross-examination?
I do, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Mr. Couns, do you have a Twitter handle?
I do.
Is that at @dcoons?
That sounds right.
Okay. I was looking at it this morning. I saw a tweet that you sent out on December 1st of 23. I'm going to read it to you, and you tell me if you agree with this, because it was your statement.
Okay.
A professional investigator seeks evidence, then forms conclusions. Comer, Jordan et al. Form conclusion, then seek evidence. It's like pounding a square peg into a round hole and saying, see, it fits.
Yes,
That sound accurate?
that sounds accurate.
Okay.
That's also what I see in this case.
Oh, okay. I'm glad you said that, because we're going to go through quite a few things here. Now, you testified right at the beginning yesterday that you have done, or did, approximately 100 total investigations in your time with the FBI.
It's an estimate for sure.
You were an agent for 22 years.
Yes,
That's somewhere between 4 and 5 a year.
that's probably right. It's probably on the low side, putting it that way.
Okay. On the low side, meaning that you weren't a very busy FBI agent?
No, not at all.
Okay.
The first 6 years I worked in Sioux Falls.
Mr. Couns, there wasn't a question before you.
Okay,
You did 15 murder investigations.
roughly, yes.
With those, now since you were FBI, I'm assuming those probably took place on native reservations?
Most of them did, yes.
Okay. Now, were you the lead on those investigations?
Some of them.
How many were you the lead on?
I'm going to say 6,
6 of those?
roughly.
Okay. Did you testify in those trials?
Yes,
Were you called the case agent in those trials?
yes.
Did you have to listen to an expert badmouth your investigation?
Objection, argumentative, Your Honor.
Yeah, but it's a legitimate question.
I believe so. I believe a couple times.
Okay. So you've heard other people Monday morning quarterback your investigation?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, I was a little confused on something that you testified to yesterday, and I'd like you to clarify. You said that you reviewed the entire file.
Yes,
Okay. But then you also said that some of the pages you felt weren't that important. Is that
Correct.
accurate?
that's accurate.
Some of the pages being more important than others.
Correct.
Okay. So did you personally review the whole file? Or did your team, Veracity IIR, review the whole file?
I personally at least glanced at every document.
Okay. Now you talked about false leads yesterday.
Yes,
Okay. And that there were quite a few false leads in this case.
yes.
Did you listen to any of the testimony from Detective Goodman?
No,
Okay. So you're not aware that, for example, there was a false lead, and actually it's in the file, about a person who they thought could have done it potentially, but was in jail for 10 days on either side, or 5 days roughly on either side of the murder.
I remember something about that. I don't remember the name of the person. It's one of those things that, you have to glance at it to deem it important or not. It's probably something that I looked at, sat over here in this pile.
So the answer to that is yes.
Correct.
Okay. Now, did you listen, as part of your review for this file, or for testimony today, did you watch the Laura Knapp testimony?
No,
Did you review the deposition that she gave?
no,
So you're unaware that her testimony was that the door was locked when she got there and she had to unlock the door.
correct.
Okay. And that she tried it before and still had to unlock it.
Correct. My testimony was based on the reports that I read in the discovery.
Okay. Again, I'm going to ask you to answer only the questions that were actually asked of you. Okay? Now, Laura Knapp testified.
Your Honor, he has stated that he didn't watch the testimony of Laura Knapp.
Okay, but I'll let him ask the question first.
Let me back up just a little bit. You testified that hardware stores cut keys.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I've worked at a hardware store, so I can agree with that statement. But the testimony from Laura Knapp was that there was only one locksmith in Minot that had that key.
Okay.
So there was only one place you could get that key cut in Minot. Does that make sense?
In my
Your Honor, I'm going to object. He did not watch the testimony of Laura Knapp. I'm not sure how he has personal knowledge of this. The witness has to have personal knowledge.
Overruled. He said specifically, he says, ask him if he knew that, and if his answer is no, then he can't go on. So overruled.
Okay,
Keep
thank you.
going.
Okay.
He's a big guy, Mr. Sand. He can answer his questions,
Thank you, Your Honor.
if he can.
So I take it you're also unaware that she said that, or testified that you could only get that key cut with permission.
I'm not aware of that testimony.
Okay. I'm going to come back to something here because something that popped up at the very end of your testimony was that you felt that the Minot Police Department was, I'm not sure if I'm paraphrasing here, but glossing over important facts.
Yes.
You don't think that you can only get the key cut from one person and it has to be by permission is an important fact in this case?
It is if it could be determined.
That's a yes
Factual.
or no question.
Yes.
Okay, so we agree it's an important fact.
Yes.
And you pretty much glossed over that, didn't you?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you've looked at a map of North Dakota.
I have.
Okay. And you know that Sykeston and Carrington are not the same place.
No, correct. I'm aware of that.
Okay. Just like Grand Forks, Fargo, Minot, Bismarck, they're not the same place.
Correct.
Okay. Do you know how far apart they are?
I don't for sure, but it's my understanding they're nearby.
Is this your first time visiting North Dakota?
Probably.
Okay. So you're not that familiar with our state?
No.
All right. Now, you testified about Nichole's statements, and you pretty much have to believe everything Nichole says for her story to make sense, don't you?
No.
Why not?
I concede that there are inconsistencies in her statement.
Okay, so the story changed.
It did.
Okay. Do you think that a person who is potentially suspected of murder would know the story?
Yes.
Okay. But her story changed.
It did.
Okay. Now you testified about that she never went back to Minot, but by reviewing the case file, you know there's a statement in there that she did return to Minot.
One witness said that, yes.
Okay. So is that the reason why you said you can't rule out Nichole as the murderer?
Well, the reason you can't rule her out is because we really...
Again, that's a yes or no
You
question.
got to let him answer, Your Honor.
Okay, it is a yes or no answer. We'll do that
Can you
first.
repeat, please?
Sure. Is that the reason you can't rule her out?
No,
Are there other reasons you can't rule her out?
there are.
Okay. Have you been to that farm outside Belleville?
I have not.
Have you driven? So you haven't been to that farm. Would it follow that you haven't driven from that farm to the apartment in North Minot?
I have not.
Okay. Now, you testified about the statement given to William May and the other people at that party. You recall that from yesterday?
I do.
Do you recall the statement that the defendant gave to William May and the other people at that party saying, "I did it"?
Can you repeat that, please?
That the defendant said, "I did it."
Yes.
Okay. And you discount that because there's no record of that phone call being made to the Minot Police Department as testified by William May.
No. I don't discount it.
You don't discount it.
No.
So you believe William May.
No. I just don't discount it.
Okay.
It's a piece of the puzzle.
piece of the puzzle. Did you watch William May's testimony?
No.
Okay. So don't know that he said when he talked to her the next day, she didn't deny killing Anita. She denied saying that she killed Anita.
All I know about what Willie May said is from the discovery in his prior statement.
Okay. So that's a no, you don't know that.
Correct.
Okay. Are you a proponent of the Reed style technique?
Certain aspects of it, not in
Okay.
its entirety.
Not in its entirety, but certain aspects.
Correct.
So you think it's a useful, if you think that certain aspects of it are good, that it has some usefulness in law enforcement.
Yes.
So do you think there was any issue with detectives using the Reed technique?
No,
Okay. So that's not a problem for you.
it is not.
All right. Now you testified about Tyler Schmaltz next. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes.
Okay. And that Anita kept him in the friend zone.
Yes.
And you testified about his Facebook.
Yes.
Now you looked at the Facebook video and talked about the drawing that he made when I believe you testified he would have been about 10.
6th grade, whatever that is.
Okay. And you said, I believe it's in your report as well here, that a person suspected of murder potentially would not do that.
I don't think that's exactly what I put, but
Let me take a look here. Extremely inappropriate considering he knows he is a suspect of a stabbing murder.
yes,
That sounds like you?
that's me.
Okay. You think it's inappropriate to say something about, for him to have a stabbing thing?
For him to say what?
For him to have a stabbing thing that's Friday the 13th or whatever it is?
I think it's unusual, yes.
Okay. So let me ask you something. When you were on direct there a moment ago, let me find my notes. Didn't you say to Mr. Sand over there that you were going to take a stab at something?
In meaning, I guess, yes.
Okay. You think that's appropriate in a case that involves a stabbing murder?
That was a poor choice of words, yes.
Okay. But you're an experienced investigator. 22 years as a law enforcement officer with the not with the Minot Police Department of Old Habits there, with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and you would let something like that slip in trial?
Apparently.
Okay. You're aware that horror movies are big business.
I don't know anything about that.
You don't drive by movie theaters and see that they have horror movies or see ads on
I
TV?
know they exist. I don't know about their big business.
Okay. They are, could we agree that they're a relatively popular genre, just like an action movie or romantic comedy, thing like that?
I'll agree to that.
Okay. So is it unusual for a person to like that sort of?
No,
Okay. Do you watch those movies?
I have.
Okay. Now, you testified at length about self-site location information.
Yes.
In your time with the FBI, did you procure cell site information?
Yes.
How did you do that? Did you do that in 2007, let's say?
I might have. I don't know for sure.
Okay. 2008?
I don't know the details, no. I've used it many times.
But you can't tell us when.
I can't tell you when.
Did you get that by subpoena or search warrant?
I believe I get those by search warrant.
Since when?
It just depends on the case. I may be incorrect. It may be just a subpoena is necessary for those. It depends on if you're going to get it from the phone and you're going to extract it using a Cellbrite or something similar. You have to have a search warrant for that. If you're going to get it from the phone company, it's a subpoena.
Cell site information comes from the phone carriers. You testified to that.
Yes, but
Okay.
you can also get it extracted from the phone itself.
But that's not what we're talking about. We're
Okay.
talking about the cell site information, which comes from the carriers.
Correct.
Okay. And you testified just now that you can get that by subpoena.
Yes.
Okay. You left the FBI in 2018?
Yes.
Are you aware about the Carpenter decision came down in 2015?
No.
The Carpenter decision was
Your
the
Honor,
U.S.
he
Supreme Court.
testified no.
Yeah, now he's going to tell him what it is, so overruled.
The Carpenter decision was the U.S. Supreme Court saying that that information was very private and can only be received through a search warrant. That was 3 years before you left the FBI, and you're unaware of that.
I'm not aware of that.
So were you violating people's rights in the last 3 years of your FBI career?
No.
Okay. So you already testified you weren't watching the testimony of Detective Goodman. I take it you were also not watching the testimony of Detective Barnard?
No, I was under sequestration at that time.
Okay. So you weren't here or watching to hear that that bowl in the sink was emptied when they processed the crime scene?
No.
That bowl, that they processed the crime scene on the 4th of June.
I wasn't here.
Okay. But you testified that the defendant saw that bowl.
Yes.
That walkthrough with the defendant occurred after they processed the scene. You'd agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So there's really no way that she could have seen that bowl if they would have emptied it and moved it. Is that accurate?
All I know is what I read in the transcript of Asham's interview with her.
I'm asking you a logical question here. If they dumped that water into a couple of water bottles, as was testified to, and they had that bowl in evidence, would there have been any way for the defendant to see that bowl without knowing that that bowl was there ahead of time?
No.
Okay. You testified that it was quite a way to go from Velva to Sykeston.
A couple hours, I believe.
Okay. But you haven't personally driven that.
I have not.
Just like you said, it was a long drive to Russo.
Depends on from where. If you're coming from Sykeston to Russo, I would
Okay.
consider that a long way.
And you haven't driven that either.
I have not.
Okay. So because you weren't here and didn't watch the testimony, are you unaware that there was money visibly there in Anita's purse?
I don't recall that detail.
Okay. That would have been in the file as well.
I'm scanning my memory banks here. I believe I do remember that nothing appeared to be missing from her purse.
Okay. You don't recall that there was money that was visible in her purse?
I don't recall that, no.
Okay. Are you glossing over an important fact there again?
Yes.
Okay. Now you testified. Now we'll just move on here. Let's talk about Marty here. Your testimony was that Marty found that screen on Sunday morning when he was doing the rounds between 7 and 7:30.
Yes.
Okay. You found that odd.
Yes.
I found that odd too because he found the screen on Monday morning, the 4th.
Okay.
You testified it was the third.
Okay.
So are you getting the facts wrong again?
Apparently I did on that one.
Okay. Let me ask you something. You reviewed Marty's history?
Some of it, yes.
Okay. Now, Marty had some issues with law enforcement, didn't he?
Yes.
As far as being arrested a couple times.
Correct.
Okay. Was he an officer with any law enforcement agency?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Now, you're an expert in investigations.
Yes.
That means that you have specialized knowledge that the rest of the world doesn't have.
Correct.
You probably have knowledge that I don't have, and I fully admit that.
Okay.
Okay. Marty wasn't an investigator, was he?
No.
So he wouldn't have the same knowledge or basis for understanding things that you have.
No.
So, based on the fact that Marty clearly doesn't have a law enforcement background, why would you think he should have thought a crime took place here?
A screen broken out of a window that's also been cut. I think it doesn't take an FBI agent to feel that something might be wrong.
You haven't actually seen the screen itself, have you?
Not physically, no.
Okay.
Pictures only.
So you don't know if it's a cheap aluminum screen?
It appears to be, but I don't know.
Okay. Now, the testimony that we've gotten in this trial, and it's in that reenactment video, because you've watched that reenactment video, you said.
Correct.
And you heard Marty's voice in that video?
I don't recall.
Okay. Do you recall someone saying that the screen was in the window?
I think so, yes. That sounds
Okay.
right.
And that was testified earlier that was Marty's voice.
Okay.
Okay. So, Marty told law enforcement that that screen was found inside the window.
Okay.
Okay. Now, do you have any way of knowing how often Marty would have had to replace screens at that apartment complex?
I don't. And can I ask a question?
No.
Okay.
I get to ask the questions here. Let me just back up. You would have no way of knowing how often Marty had to replace screens at that.
No.
Okay. Which means you wouldn't have any way of knowing if that was a common occurrence.
No.
Based on that, do you think it's possible that Marty didn't think anything of having you replace a screen?
Can you repeat that?
Based on the fact that you just testified, you don't know how often that Marty had to replace screens.
Correct.
And you just said it looked like it was a cheap aluminum screen.
Correct.
All right. You've been down to a Home Depot or Menards, Lowe's, what we've got around here.
Yes.
You've seen those screens.
I have.
Okay. And those kind of bend easily, don't they?
They do.
That's why they're cheap.
Yes.
Okay. Now it's a rental unit, right?
Yes.
Landlords typically put the cheapest thing in things that they can.
I think that's correct.
Okay. You've rented apartments in your life?
I have.
Okay. In your experience, did they put pretty cheap stuff in those apartments?
Often, yes.
Mine as well. Now, so you can't testify that it'd be unusual for him to take that screen to his shop. Except you did say that.
In the context of the case, if it's laying there broken, the unusual.
Mr. Couns, it was just
Okay.
we just agreed that it wasn't laying there. It was in the window.
I guess I don't understand your question.
Okay. You agree with me that we just established that Marty's statement was that the screen was inside the window.
Do you mean the screen was inside the frame, or the whole screen unit was inside the window where it should be?
We're talking about the whole unit, bent and all. Marty's statement was that it was in the window.
Okay.
That was in that video.
Okay.
So you agree with me that that's what the evidence says, that when Marty found it, it was in the window.
I guess I'm recalling it differently. I feel like it was found on the ground.
Do you think it's important where that window screen would have been?
It is. I know he picked up.
Mr. Couns, there's no
I'm sorry.
question before you right now. So I guess I'm just going to ask the same question I did before. Are you glossing over an important fact again?
No.
All right, then. You don't think that's an important fact, is that right?
It is an important fact.
I'm sorry, it is or is not?
It is an important fact.
It's an important fact, but the fact that you are discounting the person who found it where they said they found it is not?
No.
Okay. Now, you do agree with me, because you testified to it on direct, that DNA had to be put there inside the screen post-mortem,
Correct.
most likely from the knife.
Possibly.
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 You've seen the pictures.
I have.
Was there visible blood stains on that screen?
Yes.
Were those visible blood stains on the whole window, or were those just in the cut?
Near the cut.
Near the cut? Or in
Including
the cut?
in the cut, yes.
Yeah. Now, you talked about staging a crime scene. Do you recall that testimony?
I do.
Okay. What does it mean to stage a crime scene?
To give it the appearance of something that it's not.
Okay. So if a person committed this murder and wanted it to look like there was a break-in through the window, which would mean that the person would have to come in and out through that window. Do you agree with that? Or most likely come in and out through the window?
To make it look like they came in and out the window? Yes.
Okay. Would that potentially include wanting police to think that upon leaving, they got caught up in the curtains and pulled the curtains out with them as they went through the window?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No.
Why?
I think logically in my mind, you would just cut it and leave it at that.
You don't think you would take the extra step to make it look like somebody really had gone through that window?
No.
Okay. Have you thought about what you would do on a murder scene like that before?
In what role?
The murderer.
If I were trying to stage it, I would cut it and just leave it to be found at some point.
Okay.
I don't want anything laying outside the window to draw attention to it sooner than it's going to be found.
Mr. Couns, again,
naturally.
there's
No,
no question before you.
There was. He was answering your question, Mr. Nelson, so let him finish it. You can finish your answer.
So if I'm the murderer and I want it to look like someone came in and out the window, I would cut the window, leave it there, knowing it's eventually going to be found, and not have anything on the ground outside drawing attention to it to be found quicker than it might otherwise be found naturally.
If Marty had staged this, do you think that he would have left the window where it was?
I don't
screen,
know.
excuse me.
I don't know.
Would it have made more sense than him removing it, taking it to the shop?
Your Honor, he testified he didn't know, and then to follow up on an I don't know question. I don't know how he's going to be able to answer that.
Overruled. He can answer it, if he can.
I don't know, and if I'm wrong on this, I will admit that, but it was my assumption that the frame and all were on the ground.
Okay. That was your assumption, but
If
the
it's-
evidence we have in this case is
If
that
it's
that's
wrong,
not what it was.
I'll own that, yes.
Okay. Been wrong on a few things here, haven't you?
Argumentative, is that a question?
I'll withdraw that, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, you did testify on direct that you believe that Gordon would have checked the door when he was trying to check on Anita.
I would have if it were me, yes.
Okay. Are you a parent?
Yes.
Okay. So if you put yourself in Gordon's shoes, you would have done the same thing.
Yes.
Okay. So does it stand to reason that the door was locked and that's why he had to go find Laura?
I do believe it was locked. I just don't know for sure.
But you believe that it was locked?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the only statement, we're talking about Marty here, the only statement that Marty had a collection of knives came from a statement from a Vern Olson.
Correct.
Okay. Did you talk to Vern Olson?
I did not.
Did anyone with Veracity IIR speak to Mr. Olson?
No.
Did anyone, like an investigator for San Law, talk to Mr. Olson?
Not to my knowledge.
Maybe should have been something that should have been looked into.
If I were investigating, I would have, yes, but I was hired to review the existing investigation and weigh in on that.
So you didn't do your own investigation. You just reviewed somebody else's investigation.
Correct.
Okay. So you're aware that that part about Vern Olson saying that Marty had those knives was never verified by anyone else?
Not to my knowledge.
And you were here with when Carmen Asham testified.
I was.
And you heard Carmen Asham testify that the Minot Police Department was never able to verify that Marty had knives.
I heard her say that, yes.
Okay. Any idea where those knives might have gone?
I have no idea.
Okay. So we don't really know if he did have knives or not, or if Vern was even telling the truth.
Correct.
Okay. And we've already established that you weren't here for Laura's testimony, right?
Correct.
You didn't watch it online?
I did not.
Okay. Which means you're not aware that Laura testified that Marty didn't have knives.
I'm not aware.
Okay. Now, the testimony that Detective Asham gave yesterday, Sergeant Asham, was about Marty not having the motive, means, and opportunity. Do you recall that?
Yes.
But on direct, it was only limited to one of those three things.
Yes.
What was the only thing that was asked of you on direct?
Means.
Okay. Do you think that Marty had a motive?
Possibly.
Possibly.
He might have wanted to sexually assault her. He might have wanted to rob. I have no idea.
But you don't know.
I don't know.
These are assumptions,
Yes.
speculations.
Correct.
Okay. Are you aware of Marty ever sexually assaulting anyone?
No.
And you testified already that you looked through his criminal history.
Correct.
Okay. Now let's talk about Devon Hall. You testified that Devon Hall originally said June 2nd, arrival in Minot, and then changed it.
Correct.
Okay. And you watched that video, you testified to it. I believe you said it was originally VHS and then transmitted into digital, or I'm not exactly how sure that works, but that's how you watched it, was digitally.
Correct.
Of Devon Hall at the train station in Minot.
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever ridden the Empire Builder?
Have I ever ridden what?
The Empire Builder?
No.
Do you know what the Empire Builder is?
I do not.
The Empire Builder is the train that runs from Chicago to Seattle and Portland.
Okay.
That's the train that Devon Hall rode,
Okay.
the Amtrak train. Did you look into the Amtrak?
Some aspects of it, yes.
But you didn't bother to figure out which train it was?
I looked at the records in the discovery.
Okay. So you don't know how long the Empire Builder tends to be, do you? By that I mean how many cars?
I have no idea.
Okay. Now, I've ridden the Empire Builder quite a few times. Would you have any reason to doubt when I tell you that there's approximately 12 to 14 cars behind the locomotives on that train?
No clue about that.
Okay. Have you ever ridden Amtrak?
I have.
When was the last time you rode Amtrak?
It was a fall break. My wife's teacher, we went from Chicago to New Mexico. Southwest Chief, I believe it's called.
Okay. But the question was when?
Oh, I'm sorry. 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay. Do you recall when you bought the tickets for that you were able to choose which car you were going to be in, other than the special cars, the special rooms versus the coach?
I don't recall a lot about that. I did it online on the app, and I just told it what class we wanted, and I don't think I chose exactly what car or seat.
When you got to the train, did the conductor tell you which car you were going to get into?
No.
I'm sorry?
I don't think so, no.
The conductor didn't tell you which car to get on?
I knew which train to get on. I don't recall being told specifically to get on a certain car of that train. I just don't remember.
Now, you saw on that trip, you would have seen people coming and going, because you're talking about from Indianapolis to the southwest, it's a fair distance.
Yes.
Okay. Those people would have had to figure out where they're going to go on the train, right?
I guess.
Okay. Do you recall having a piece of paper stuck above your seat saying where you were exiting the train?
I don't recall, no.
Okay. But it's been 5 years since you were on Amtrak.
Yes.
So you really don't know how Amtrak works that much, do you?
Not very well, no.
Okay. Now, you testified that Devon Hall was not on the Amtrak records from the June 2nd and June 3rd.
Correct.
Okay. But you reviewed the entire file.
Yes.
And in that file, there were statements that he slipped a station agent $20 to get on that train without having to buy a ticket. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So if you slipped the station agent $20 to get on that train, would there be any record of him being on that train?
If true, no.
Okay. If true. Now, you testified you did watch that video when they, in Minot.
Yes.
And you read the entire file.
I at least looked at it, yes.
Did you review the specific documents about police interviews of other individuals that were in that video?
I believe I saw some, yes.
Okay. And those people confirmed that they got off that train at about 9:30 on the 3rd of June in Minot.
Yes.
Okay. And that's the video that Devon Hall has seen outside the Amtrak station.
Yes.
Okay. Now, Devon Hall lived in Wolf Point, right?
Yes.
Do you know how long it takes to take the Amtrak from Wolf Point to Minot?
I don't.
Would you be surprised if, according to Amtrak, it takes 5 hours, 36 minutes?
Nope.
Okay, does that sound about accurate to you?
It would make sense, yes.
Okay. Now, if it takes approximately 5 hours, 36 minutes, and I corrected actually, the time that it arrived in Minot was 9:20 p.m. on the 3rd of June. Does that sound right?
Correct.
Okay. Does that mean that you would have had to leave Wolf Point at approximately 3:30 p.m. if it takes 5 hours and 36 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. You know how long it takes to drive from Wolf Point to Minot?
I don't.
You didn't Google that when you were doing your research for this case?
I don't know how long it takes to drive from Wolf Point to Minot, no.
Now, if I Googled it this morning, and Google told me it was 3 hours, 42 minutes to go from Wolf Point to Minot. Does that sound accurate?
I have no reason not to believe that, no.
Okay. The question is, does it sound accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if we do a round trip there, so you multiply that by 2, 7 hours, 24-minute round trip.
Okay.
The math on that?
Yes.
Okay. So, what time do you think Anita died?
Roughly between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m.
And you think that a person that would have had to drive to Minot, commit the murder, drive back to Wolf Point, and then get on a train and come back to Minot is the most likely person to have done it? Yes?
I never said that that's how it went. No.
No.
So no.
Follow me here.
No, I don't agree with
Follow me here. You think that Devon Hall is the most likely suspect?
that. Yes.
Okay. And that's because your compatriots or former compatriots of the FBI, or part of it was because they thought it was the most likely suspect.
Yes.
Okay. If he was on that train, and multiple people gave statements that he was on that train, right?
Yes.
Okay. Did any of those people have a motive to lie?
Yes.
What was that motive?
Friends and family of his would possibly want to cover for him.
So you think that friends and family of a person accused of murder would cover for them?
It's possible.
It's possible.
It is.
So statements by the defendant's family and friends about where she was, is it possible they lied about where Nichole was?
It is possible.
Okay. Okay. Now, you testified that on that June 11th date when Devon Hall was arrested in Minot, that he had attempted sexual assault.
Yes.
That's not accurate, is it? Yeah, it was a different crime entirely, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so you were wrong on that.
I'm not.
It's okay to admit it.
I'm not going to admit to that one. No.
You're not.
I think that was his intention.
You think it was his intention
Yes.
when he drunkenly went into an apartment, right? Do you know where he was staying at that time?
According to the records, he said his homeboys.
Which was at 804 Sioux Street, right?
No, that's his aunt's, I believe.
Yeah, but that's where he was staying.
But that's not what he told investigators.
Okay. Now you remember that specifically, huh?
I do.
Okay. Is that because you thought it was a really important thing?
It was, yes.
Okay. But there's nothing in the file that indicates that he had attempted sexual assault that night, is there?
No.
Okay. But you think he did?
I think it's his intention. It was his intention.
Based on nothing? If there's nothing in the file, what are you basing that on?
The entirety of the file.
There's nothing in the file. So what are you basing that on?
His subsequent convictions for similar activities in which he broke into homes and sexually assaulted women.
When you went through the FBI Academy, did you learn about criminals escalating their behavior?
I don't recall that specifically. It's been a long time ago.
Sure. Now, do you recall getting trainings over the 22 years that you were with the FBI that might have dealt with that?
Yes.
What is escalation?
As you mature as a criminal, your acts get more and more severe.
Okay. So, is it potentially an escalation from the first break-in to subsequent ones as far as sexually assaulting someone?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything in the file, then, that indicates he wasn't escalating?
They seem to be all similar, so I would say no, there's no escalation.
Okay. But that's just speculation on your part, isn't it?
It is.
Okay. Yeah. Has Devon Hall killed anyone?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Now, you testified about some jail calls regarding Devon Hall. When did those jail calls take place?
I don't remember the exact dates. I would have to refer back to the notes.
Okay. Now, your testimony was that he said it was his knife.
Yes.
Okay. Where did you get that information from?
There's a transcript in the file
Transcript of what?
of Devon's phone call to his family members.
Okay. Do you recall a interview that Detective Goodman did with Devon Hall out in Wolf Point,
Yes.
where he showed Devon Hall the knife?
Yes.
Isn't it true that Devon Hall said it looks like the knife that I had?
Yes.
Okay. But he never said in that interview that it was his knife, did it?
No.
He just said it looked like his knife.
In that interview, yes.
Okay. Now, you were here through Carmen Ashton's testimony.
Yes.
So you heard that that knife that Devon Hall thought looked like his was later turned into law enforcement.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you said that there were unique things about that knife,
Yes.
but then you said it was mass-produced.
Yes.
So exactly, help me understand how something can be both unique and mass-produced.
The missing emblem is the big thing.
Okay. This is a cheap knife, isn't it?
I don't know how much it costs.
Okay. There was testimony to that it was a cheap knife.
There was testimony to that. I don't know how much it costs.
Okay. Do you have any reason to doubt that that was a cheap knife?
Nope.
Does it look like a cheap knife?
I don't know. I haven't seen the actual physical knife. That would be helpful to know if it's cheap or not.
Now, you testified that the odds of similar knives having similar missing medallions would be astronomical.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you're aware in this file that there was a belief that there was a missing pair of blue pajama bottoms with ducks on them.
I remember that.
Okay. And where it was a pair found?
I believe those were found in trash somewhere.
Mm-hmm. So law enforcement went to the dump where the trash from this apartment complex was and found a pair
Yes.
in the same trash that came from this apartment complex.
Yes.
Were those the same pants that had belonged to Anita?
I think it was determined that they were, but I'm not sure.
Would it surprise you if you learned that those were not the same pants, that the ducks were different sizes?
It would not.
Okay. You think it's astronomical for there to be a missing pair of pants and a pair of pants that match that description found that weren't the same pants?
Yeah, it's a pretty big coincidence for sure.
Okay. So big coincidences happen sometimes.
They do.
Okay. Now, you testified on direct about Becky Ehrman talking about this person running, the running man.
Correct.
You said that night. That was your testimony.
Yes.
This murder didn't take place at night, did it?
I'm sorry?
This murder did not take place at night, did it?
It would, if it were between 5 and 7, I believe it would still be dark. So it's in the morning, but night being dark, semantics.
This is June 4 of 2007.
Okay.
When is the summer solstice?
I don't know.
June 21.
Okay.
June 21, 22, somewhere in that range. That would be how many days before this?
13, 14, something like that?
17, 18.
17, 18. Okay.
Do you know how daylight works when it gets closer to the solstice?
Days get longer.
Okay. But my question is, the amount of daylight you gain on a daily basis, are you aware that it gets shorter every day as you get closer to the solstice?
I'm not aware of exactly how it works. I don't know what the lighting conditions were at the time.
Okay. So this is not something that you've had to figure out in your 22 years as a law enforcement officer?
I've done it before on other cases, yes.
Okay. Now, Minot's a fairly northern city, isn't it?
Yes.
So Minot has, in the summertime, Minot would have a longer day than, say, Dallas, Texas.
Correct.
Okay. And you still think it was that night?
I know what time it was.
Okay.
I'm not going to comment on the
Okay.
light.
We'll move along. And you said that that was highly coincidental that somebody would be running in that area around the time of the murder.
Yes.
People go for runs, don't they?
It was described, yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Now, you thought it was odd, or you testified, that that person that was running must have washed their hands, but they left their bloody shirt on. Explain that to me.
I didn't say anything about anyone washing their hands.
The hands were clean, according to the witness.
Is there a question?
Is
No.
that not accurate?
Now it's a question.
In the statement I read of Becky Ehrman, I don't recall her talking about his hands were clean.
Okay. Now, Nichole was the one talking about the murderer washing their hands in the sink. Do you recall that?
No.
Which would account for the bowl of water in the sink.
Okay.
Okay. Now, you testified earlier that some of the documents, and there's about 6,000 pages, 7,000. It's a lot, isn't it?
It's a lot.
Okay. Some of those pages are more valuable than others.
Correct.
I would imagine, if I was in your shoes, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the statements given by the defendant would be incredibly valuable pieces to go over.
Yes.
Would that mean that you would have spent more time on those than potentially, say, for example, the page involving the false lead about the person who was in jail the whole time?
Yes.
Okay. And you don't recall that? About Nichole saying that the murderer must have washed their hands?
I do not.
Glossed over that one, didn't you?
Answer, Your Honor.
Sustained. He does not recall.
Okay. Now, you testified, based on your knowledge of the case, that the FBI thought that Devon Hall was the most likely suspect.
Strongest suspect, yes.
Okay. Is there a difference between most likely and strongest?
No, not really.
Okay. And that would have been based on the information that the FBI was given?
Correct.
Because the FBI is not an all-knowing agency, are they?
Nope.
Okay. Just like your testimony is only based on the information that you were given.
Exactly.
And you didn't interview any of these people?
I did not.
Okay. Okay. Now, do you recall your investigative report?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall saying in that report that the break-in that Devon Hall did on June 11 was in the same apartment complex that the murder took place in?
Yes, that's a mistake.
I'm sorry?
Yes, that's a mistake.
Okay. How far apart are they?
I don't know in terms of miles, but they're on the other side of town.
Okay. Completely different quadrants of Minot, aren't they?
Yes.
So the murder is on the North Hill, which is the north end of Minot, and Sioux Street is on the southeast portion of Minot.
That's correct.
Okay. Do you think that's an important detail?
It is.
Okay. Now, you testified, or excuse me, you wrote, let me clarify, because we're talking about the report here. you wrote that you don't think that the defendant would have had a reasonable reason for murder.
No.
What is a reasonable reason for murder?
It could be different things. What I read was petty bickering between roommates.
Okay. Now, do people, you were involved in 15 murder investigations.
Roughly.
About 6, I think you said you were the lead detective, or the lead investigator.
Yes.
Were all of those murders what you would consider reasonable murders?
Some more than others. It just depends. You know, there's infidelity is sometimes a reason. Snitching is often the reason. There's a variety of reasons, but nothing about like your alarm clock wouldn't go off.
Okay. Now, we had a murder in Minot a few years back that the reason for the murder was a TV remote control. Would that strike you as a reasonable or unreasonable murder?
Yes, unreasonable.
I'm sorry?
Unreasonable.
Unreasonable. So people sometimes kill in unreasonable circumstances.
Sometimes.
So a situation that you yourself couldn't see someone pulling the trigger, stabbing someone else could go ahead and do that.
Yes.
Okay. Testimony from Carmen Asham about the holdbacks from law enforcement.
Yes.
And those holdbacks in this case were things like that Anita was wearing a robe. You heard that?
Yes.
That how she was laying.
Yes.
That about the bowl in the sink even was a holdback.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you didn't watch, let me ask you this. Did you watch the testimony from Brenda Glintz?
No,
And you weren't in court for that testimony either?
I was not.
Okay. So, do you have any explanation, because Brenda testified that her niece, the defendant, told her about how Anita was laying, that she was wearing a robe, and the scene of the crime?
I don't know what she said in here.
That wasn't my question. My question is this. The testimony was that Nichole said, this is how Anita was laid on the bed. That she looked peaceful and wearing her robe, and then talking about the Tupperware in the sink. Do you have any explanation as to how the defendant could have possessed that knowledge at the time of that statement?
Your Honor, that calls for speculation. One, he wasn't here for the testimony. Two, he's asking to get inside the defendant's brain.
Yeah, but we certified him as an expert in investigation so that he can answer the question. Your objection's overruled.
Okay.
If she actually told her that, I can't explain why she would say that.
Now, that's the sort of information that could only come from someone who was in the apartment, correct?
Correct.
So the only logical explanation is that she had to have been, if that statement is true, you're with me so far?
I am.
If that statement is true and it was testified to, the only logical conclusion is that the defendant was in that apartment before she said she was.
Correct.
Was identified, wasn't he? The running man?
A runner was came forward.
And he came forward shortly after the police released the details about that?
Yes.
I believe he had the most unfortunate last name I've ever seen in my life, of Raper.
I wasn't aware of his last name, but yes, that is unfortunate.
Okay. Now you're aware of it because there's a picture of Adam Raper next to the sketch. That would have been in the discovery.
Yes.
Okay. Your report here says that the defendant sent a text message to Anita well after the time of death.
Yes.
You say it is unlikely Rice would text Knutson if she knew she was already deceased.
Correct.
Investigators very briefly considered this, but then dismissed the idea. Is that accurate?
I think he left part of it out.
I can show it to you.
Yes. They considered, can I
Hang on a
elaborate?
second. There's kind of a line here of blank.
Yeah, it didn't, when I
Didn't print
converted
right?
from Word to PDF, it put a line in there.
I think we all have that experience of putting stuff together that doesn't quite line up right.
Right.
So I commiserate with that. Now, you think that it's more likely that the defendant didn't know that Anita was dead.
That's my opinion, yes.
Based on what?
She's sending her a text well after she is deceased. It doesn't look to me as if it were a ruse or a staged text to make it look as if she was not already aware.
So that's speculation, isn't it?
It is.
Okay. You're not giving Nichole a whole lot of credit here, are you?
No, I don't think
Okay.
she's a sophisticated killer.
Okay. Now, the only statements we have from Nichole's family about where Nichole was have quite a gap in there, don't we? As far as time.
Depends on when are you referring to?
Well, I'm talking about the date of the murder.
Okay.
That there's a significant gap where it's missing from the alibi because people were sleeping, that sort of thing.
During the hours when she claims to be sleeping, yes, that's a long
Okay.
time.
So there is no actual alibi person who can testify that she never left the farm during those times.
Correct.
That time frame, was that sufficient for her to go back to the apartment and commit the murder?
It is enough time, yes.
Okay. So we don't really have an alibi for that time period, do we?
We do not.
Now you have some information that I don't have regarding a interview done of Brenda Glenn's.
Yes.
Okay. Who interviewed Brenda Glenn's?
The defense has a private investigator that did some legwork.
Okay. What was that legwork?
Interviewing a number of people, including Brenda.
Okay. So their investigator reached out to multiple people, including Brenda.
Yes. 3 that I know of.
3 that you know of.
Yes.
Who else did that investigator reach out to?
Alyssa Lyer, who is the cousin that I talked about, who traveled from the family event to the bar to her house to watch a movie, and Alyssa's mother, Joyce Anderson.
So you have no knowledge of that investigator reaching out to Devon Hall
I don't.
or Vern Olson or anyone else involved in this?
No.
Now, you're an expert in investigations.
Yes.
You certified to that starting in this trial.
Yes.
Do you think that they did a decent job investigating this case?
I would say no. I would have interviewed those people.
Okay. Did they ask you who that they should be interviewing?
No. My role was consultant to review the discovery.
Okay.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. Is the state implying that the defendant has an obligation to investigate this case?
No,
That's in,
it was a direct question as to whether or not his opinion is that you did a sufficient job. So I don't know if he's implying that or not. He asked the question directly and your expert answered it. So I'm
Thank
not
you,
sure
Honor.
what your objection is.
withdrawn, Your Honor.
Next. Mr. Nelson, are you close to a stopping point?
Fairly close, Your Honor.
Okay.
Oh, I know. Take a break, we certainly can, Your Honor.
I am aware that I have that power, Mr. Nelson. I was just asking Alfred if you were close or not.
Well, I do think I have a few more questions, but I
All
would
right.
not be opposed to a break.
Then I will exercise my authority. We will take a break. The time is 10:15. We've been at it for almost a couple hours. So we will take a short break till 10:30, 15 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, once again, I'm going to give you my admonition. Do not converse with any witnesses, any party, or any attorney in this case concerning any matter. Direct any questions.
Now, you testified that the defendant was interviewed multiple times.
Yes,
I believe it's 5 times?
sounds right.
Okay. I'm just going to run through the list that I have. Twice on June 4th of 2007.
Okay,
Once on June 11th of 2007.
yes,
May 6th of 2010.
okay,
And then not until March 12th of 2022.
correct.
Okay. Now, the statements regarding that we've heard testified to that she did it, the details, all that took place after those 2007 interviews, correct?
Correct.
Okay. After she'd been interviewed multiple times by law enforcement. 3
Correct.
times already. Correct?
Yes,
Okay. Now, assuming that Nichole is the murderer, when she's interviewed by law enforcement, would you expect her to say that she was in Minot at any of those times? Any of those 5 interviews?
no,
Why?
it does not behoove one to be near the crime scene at the time,
So you would-
especially if they're not,
Especially if they're not?
if they weren't there, yeah.
Okay. But we're assuming that she did commit the murder and for this question. Okay? You follow me?
Objection, Your Honor. The fact that
Sustained.
it's, yeah.
Okay. You wouldn't expect her to say that she had been in Minot because that would implicate her, wouldn't it?
Same objection. We're on the same line of questioning, Your Honor.
Well, the line of questioning is appropriate. The technique may not be appropriate. Can you rephrase your question, please, Mr. Nelson?
If she had stated that she was in or around Minot at the time of the murder, would that have provided law enforcement with evidence potentially connecting her to the murder?
Your Honor, speculation.
We've gotten quite a bit of speculation testimony from this witness as it is, Your Honor.
We have, and again, speculation is sufficient and appropriate with an expert. I'm going to overrule the objection. He can answer the question if he can, Mr. Nelson.
Can you repeat it, please?
Sure. If Nichole had told law enforcement that she would have, let me put it this way, if she had told law enforcement that she was in or around Minot at approximately the time of the murder. Follow me so far?
Yep.
Okay. If she had told law enforcement that, would that tend to make her a stronger suspect?
It would.
Okay. Now, Tyler Schmaltz and Michael Van, they were both alibied, correct?
Yes.
And you know that from your reviewing the entirety of the file?
I mean, there's some degree of alibi, yes.
Okay. But they were alibied, correct?
There are alibis, yes.
There are alibis for both of them.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when Devon Hall was arrested on June 11th,
Okay.
2007, this is the break-in on the south end of Minot that we've established was way far from their apartment on the north side.
Right.
Okay. Are you aware if he was drunk and high at that point?
I'm pretty sure he was drunk. I don't know about high.
You don't recall reading that he was high in marijuana in your review of...
I don't think he was, like, blood tested for it. I think he said that he was.
Mr. Couns, we don't blood test for marijuana. We use urine tests for marijuana. It doesn't show up in blood.
Okay. He was not tested for it. So
Are you aware of that, Mr. Couns?
yes,
Then why would you say he wasn't blood tested?
he wasn't blood tested for the alcohol nor drug tested.
The officers noted that, though, didn't they?
Yes.
Okay. Any reason to discount the officers' belief?
No.
Now, I took a look at your professional website, and it is a professional-looking website for Veracity IIR. So you did well with that.
Thank you.
Okay. That was a bit of a compliment. I wasn't trying to trap you with that. Now, on your website, I saw clips of you doing interviews, things of that nature.
Yes.
Okay. Why do you have those on your website?
Your Honor, relevance?
Mr. Nelson, you going somewhere with this?
I have just one or two questions, and I'll be done.
All right, I'll overrule the objection. Please make it connected somehow.
I will, Your Honor.
I am occasionally contacted by news media to provide my insight into whatever the incident of the day was.
Okay. So you put that up there to show that you know things about certain things, right?
Yes,
It's promoting your own business.
it is.
Okay. After this cross-examination, are you planning on putting the video of your testimony today on your website?
Your Honor, relevance to the case at hand.
It goes to his belief in what he's testifying to, Your Honor.
Asking
his
about something
credibility.
that hasn't happened.
Sustained.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Sand, do you have any redirect?
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Couns, on cross, you were asked a lot of yes and no questions, and it sounded like you wanted to get some answers out and a chance to explain yourself regarding those yes or no answers. Does that sound fair?
It does.
Okay, well, hopefully we have an opportunity to do that. I'm going to kind of work chronologically through the state's cross, so I don't mean to be jumping around from topic to topic, but I took notes just trying to follow along with their cross, so if that happens, please excuse me. One of the first things they brought up was how many investigations that you had conducted while you were at the FBI, or how many investigations you had been a part of. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay, and it sounded like you were going to testify regarding the timeline of your career at the FBI. Would that be fair to say?
It's fair.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit more about the timeline regarding investigations during your career at the FBI?
Yes. During my first 6 years in Sioux Falls, the first 4 or 5 of them were mostly crimes on Indian reservations. There was a lot of volume there. After September 11th, my focus became on counterterrorism. Very few cases, but they were long, ongoing cases at that time. In 2006, I was transferred to FBI headquarters, and that was at the time I became a supervisor. I didn't work any cases. I was program oversight for the WMD Chemical Countermeasures Unit. So for 2 years, I worked no cases of my own. And then when I went back to the field after my stint at headquarters, I was the Field Intelligence Group supervisor for I think another couple of years. So there was a 4-year period that I did not work any cases of my own. After that, I was made the team leader of Special Operations Group, which is mostly surveillance. So my team was detailed to typically keep under surveillance high priority targets such as terrorists, spies, public corruption, those kind of things. Those were not my own cases. After that, I became a human intelligence specialist, in which I recruited and developed informants to provide information for other ongoing cases. So none of those were my own. So more than half of my career, I did not have my own caseload.
And So just to be clear, your time, you said in the field. Can you elaborate on what that means?
So time in the field, it can mean different things, but as a case agent, a regular special agent works cases. A supervisory special agent does not typically work cases. They supervise those who do. And then in the roles that I was placed after being a supervisor, the nature of them did not lead to me having my own caseload either.
So when you did have your own caseload, when you were in the field,
Yes.
can you please explain to the court what years that would have been?
So that would have been, after the academy. I think I showed up in Sioux Falls in the spring of 2007. I'm sorry, 97. And then, so about 11 years I had a caseload.
So 97 till about 2008, is that fair? Is that the math you gave?
97 to about 2006.
Okay. So when you were when the state attempted to discredit you regarding search warrants and the law changing in 2018, you didn't have your own caseload.
No, I was not working my own cases at that time. I was not obtaining CSLI for myself at that time.
And CSLI, can you please explain again what that is?
Cell site location information.
And that was used in this case in one particular instance, correct?
On one individual, yes.
And who again was that?
Gio Rodriguez.
But it was not used to determine the whereabouts of the accused, Ms. Rice, correct?
Correct.
What do you think of that?
It would have cleared this whole thing up.
Okay. Now, the next topic the state went on to was Tyler Schmalz and something about horror movies. Do you recall that?
I do.
You were asked about your knowledge of the horror movie industry?
Yes.
Okay. Does the fact that the horror industry is a big money business, as the state would say, affect your or change your opinion regarding Tyler Schmalz's social media posts about horror scenes with knives?
No. My point was that it seems inappropriate for someone who is suspected in a murder involving a stabbing would put that type of material up on their page.
And the next topic had to do with towns involved in this case, and it sounded like the waters got a little muddied here, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to explain yourself, because like we said, you got the yes or no answers, but you didn't get to explain yourself. So do you recall being asked questions about towns like Sykeston, towns like Russo, towns like Velva?
Yes.
Okay. Now, how did you come to learn where these towns are?
I looked at a map on Google.
Okay. And can you give us a proximity, from your best understanding for looking at that map, how close Sykeston is to Velva?
If I'm recalling correctly, it's roughly an hour and a half, 2 hours.
And
South and east, I believe.
And there, from your testimony and the testimony that you heard from Sergeant Asham, there's only one trip from Sykeston back to the Velva-Russo area, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so after that trip, all of the moving around happened between Velva, between Russo, between neighbors in the Velva-Russo area, correct?
Yes.
How big of an area is that?
Small.
Okay. How small, if you can testify to it, if not?
I believe I read or heard that it's roughly a 5-minute drive from Joyce Anderson's house. That's where the cousin Alyssa Lyer also lives. It's about 5 minutes from that house to the Thomas house in Velva.
You had testified yesterday about people when they go home from college. Home doesn't necessarily mean they're...
Objection, Your Honor, this is beyond the scope.
Oh, we're talking about the towns.
Overruled. He can answer it.
Talking about going home for college, and what does you testified what home meant? Can you state that again?
Well, it can mean different things was my point. And home, and I was guilty of it myself when I realized I had made a possibly confusing comment about home. In this case, there are two places she could mean or that anyone could mean when talking about her home, where she lived in Minot, in the apartment with Anita, and her home where her parents lived and where she was raised.
The next thing that was brought up was Marty and Elle. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And the state had asked you if, to the best of your knowledge, if you knew that if Marty had any investigative experience or training. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, regarding the testimony that was brought up by the state and yourself regarding the curtain rods being thrown back into Anita's apartment. Now, does that make any common sense to do that as just an individual, and let alone a maintenance man?
Objection, Your Honor, as to compound question.
Yeah, Mr. Sand, can you clarify it a little bit for us, please?
Does it make common sense to you for a maintenance man to throw curtain rods and curtains back into an apartment?
I guess it could. I mean, I would assume he's going to go fix the screen, come back, reinstall the frame with the new screen in it, put the rod and the curtain back up. But the rod and the curtain don't need to be repaired, so you also don't want to just leave it on the ground. So I guess it would make sense.
And you testified that you looked at this case file, correct?
Yes.
Did you look at any pictures of the crime scene, specifically
Yes.
Anita's bedroom?
Yes.
About how far away was Anita's body from the window?
Feet. Single digits.
Single digits feet. So would it be fair to say that it wouldn't be difficult for Marty to see her body there?
Yes, especially if it was already light out, as prosecution mentioned.
Do you find it odd to throw curtains and curtain rods into an apartment that contains a dead body?
Yes.
Why is that?
I would think you would stop what you're doing and call 911.
Now, there's been a lot of questions regarding the window, whether the screen or the window was on the building itself or whether it was on the ground. Do you recall that?
I do.
Were you there at the scene?
I was not.
When, after you review the case file, when law enforcement showed up, it's fair to say that the window had already been, the window was, the screen and the window were not on the building, correct?
Correct.
There's been a lot of questions from the state to you regarding your, not investigation into the case file that you were provided, but investigation into this case. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Now, you were hired as an expert witness to testify regarding the contents of the case file, correct?
Correct.
Were you hired as a private investigator, or were you contracted by the state or any government entity to do your own investigation into this case?
No.
You weren't supposed to be contacting witnesses or interviewing witnesses?
No.
Driving from Sykeston to Russo or Velva?
No.
Driving from Wolf Point to Minot?
No.
Riding the train?
Nope.
Your job was to review the case file, review what you think that how their investigation was conducted, correct?
Correct.
How do you think their investigation was conducted?
Not very well. There are many loose ends that could
Objection,
still be.
Your Honor.
That's fine, Your Honor. I got another question.
Okay.
What would you have done differently if you were the investigator in this case?
In my opinion, there are a lot of loose ends that could still be tied down. I would do everything I could to tighten this up. It seems a little loose to me, and not just a little loose, it's loose. The knife issue, the Marty, all the stuff that we've talked about could be drilled down deeper.
Let's go piece by piece. You mentioned the knife. What about the knife?
The knife, the transcript of him talking to his family is more telling to me than his interview with law enforcement, because he's got more reason to be deceptive to law enforcement than when talking to his family. And I can almost...
Your Honor, I don't know who we're talking about when the witness says he here.
Devon Hall.
Okay, well, thanks for clarifying. Continue.
When Devon Hall speaks to his family, I can almost say this verbatim, but I'm not going to say it's verbatim because I don't have it in front of me. But he tells family members, I had that knife they showed me. I took it from Jaren's house, and I told him I lost it somewhere. That's powerful to me.
You also mentioned Marty, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. If I'm mischaracterizing your testimony, please correct me, but it sounds like you said the knife, and then you said that you do a somewhat different investigation regarding Marty and Nell. Can you speak to that?
I would have interviewed Vern Olson again. I would have interviewed more of his family members. The interviews are a little superficial, I would say. I know the cold justice people talk to him with the locals. They're giving him the benefit of the doubt, in my opinion. I feel like you could explore that more thoroughly. I wasn't satisfied, and same with some of the other subjects.
The next point or topic that the state went over was Ms. Knapp. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. And you had testified that you weren't here for Ms. Knapp's testimony, but you read her interviews and such?
Right. So I was under sequestration when she testified, but I have reviewed her statements that she gave that were included in the discovery that I was given.
What would you think if you found out that during her testimony she said that after Anita's murder, her and Marty, who were fiancés according to her testimony, never discussed Anita's murder?
Objection or leading?
Start. It was a what question? What would you think?
Yeah, I'm going to sustain the objection. Can you reword it, please?
Sure. What, if any, thoughts would you have if you found out that Marty, Anel, and Ms. Knapp never discussed Anita's murder after the murder?
That's suspicious. That's odd.
Why is that?
Because it's a big deal. You would talk about it with your fiance.
And coworker, is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would think that's big news. I would think there would be a lot of talk amongst everybody that had anything to do with it.
Especially if the murder happened at the apartment complex that you were in charge of?
Yes, absolutely.
What, if any, thoughts would you have if you found out that Ms. Knapp testified that Marty wasn't a big drinker?
That's contrary to what other people have said, but is what it is.
I'd like to move on to the next topic the state brought up was Devon Hall. There's a little jumping around. I'm going to try to keep it at least somewhat of a flow, some type of chronological flow, but I do want to address piece by piece what the state has brought up. They brought up the train records. Now, you had testified earlier that you did not see Devon Hall in the train records, correct?
I did not see him in the actual records, no.
Okay. They tried to clear that up by saying that Devon had slipped a gate agent $20 to get on the train. Do you have any experience that that would be something that could occur?
I have no experience with that.
Okay. And you testified earlier that there's absolutely no evidence of whether physical or otherwise of Devon Hall getting off the train in the video that we're talking about, correct?
Correct.
And this is the Wested video?
Yeah, you can see him walking, but I don't see him. I've watched that several times. I don't see him coming out of a car.
And regardless, you had testified that video couldn't be accurately dated, correct?
Correct.
It said, the video said something about the year 2000?
I believe it's 1/1/2000 or something like that.
Is it fair to say that the state was attempting to prove a negative here?
That's fair.
Can you explain that, please?
I believe they're trying to suggest that he could not be responsible for the murder because they have this video, but there's no evidence that the video was taken on the day that would have precluded him from being in Minot.
So, can't trust the video, not on the train records, can't put Devon on the train on any day, correct?
No, other than the other witnesses that were in his group. or with his friends and family,
And
I should say.
in your review of the case file, did you find any evidence of Devon actually saying that he came to Minot on the 2nd?
Yes.
Okay, can you explain that?
In his very first interview after his arrest on the 11th, he said it was the 2nd, June 2nd, 2007.
So there's been some questions and some testimony regarding when Devon Hall gets to Minot and if the timing lines up of his ability to be able to kill Anita. If he got to Minot on the 2nd and Anita wasn't killed until the early hours of the 3rd, he could have killed Anita, right?
Correct.
Now, you were also asked a little bit about his criminal history, and I think something came up about him having murdered anybody before. Are you basing that off of the fact that he doesn't have any murder convictions?
Yes,
Okay, but he's got several other convictions, correct?
he does.
Okay. A lot for breaking and entering, right?
Yes,
A lot of stuff with knives.
yes.
Speaking of knives, there was, I guess, an example given by the state regarding the statement that you had given regarding how the chances of there being separate knives in this case being astronomical, that it had to be Devon's knife, correct?
Yes,
Okay, and the example that they gave had something to do with some pants that had some ducks on them, right?
yes,
And that they were looking for these pants. They found a different pair of pants that were similar that were in a trash can, right?
yes.
Did the example of the pants factor into the equation that the pants had been used in the commission of a murder?
No,
So there's that extra detail there, right?
yes,
Does that add into the fact you factoring into the case that it's an astronomical coincidence that there are these two knives that are missing medallions that are used in a murder that are, I mean, is that fair to say?
it's fair.
Now the next topic that the state talked about was the runner or the jogger. We'll call him the jogger, just to be fair. If anybody has an objection to that, I'm happy to change the characterization. You had testified when being questioned by the state that a runner had came forward, but you weren't able to explain your answer. I have no idea what your answer is going to be, but I want to give you the opportunity to explain what you're going to say.
Sure. In Becky Ehrman's statement, part of it was that someone was running hard, like running away from something, not just out for a jog. That's paraphrased.
In reviewing Ms. Ehrman's reports, what was that runner wearing or that jogger wearing?
White t-shirt, gym shorts, tennis shoes, clean shaven, short but not too short hair, in a state of disarray. 6'2", 6 foot to 6'2", I believe, roughly 200 pounds. That's all I remember.
Anything on the shirt?
The shirt looked like it had blood or dirt on it, on the right side specifically.
How about the ethnicity?
Native American.
Now, aside from the ethnicity, I'm talking about the blood, talking about the attire the person was wearing. Is that typical characterization about somebody out for a morning jog?
No.
Is it more typical about of a characterization of somebody running away from a crime scene?
Yes.
Does that description fit any suspect in this case?
It fits Devon Hall almost exactly.
Next point that the state made was regarding Devon Hall, his location in Minot. From the time of the murder to the time of his subsequent arrest, where he broke into that other apartment. Do you recall that?
Can you repeat, please?
Sure. That was convoluted. I apologize. So the next topic we talked about was Hall's whereabouts in Minot. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the state asked you some questions about the distance between Anita Knutson's apartment and where Devon was arrested, a week or so later?
Correct.
And you said you had a chance to look at these cities and towns on Google Maps, correct?
Yes.
Would you state that Minot is a vast metropolis?
It is not.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that it's reasonable for a person to get from one end of Minot to the other within a week or week and a half's time?
Yes.
And I don't mean to be funny, but is that reasonable to assume?
Yes.
The next topic that the state brought up was Brenda Glynn's, and I know that you stated you weren't here for her testimony because you were under sequestration, but that you did review her interview with Sergeant Asham and the representative from Cold Justice, correct?
Correct.
And you sat in Sergeant Asham's testimony, correct?
Yes.
And the state had asked you some questions regarding Nichole's statements.
Yes.
And that was regarding some, what they're characterizing as holdback evidence, but evidence in the case, something about the robe, something about other things from the crime scene, right?
Correct.
Now, Sergeant Asham testified that this occurred in 2008, correct?
Yes.
A year after the murder, correct?
A year after, correct.
Now, Brenda had testified that it was 4 to 6 weeks after the murder, but that got cleared up by Sergeant Asham and by the materials you reviewed in the case file, correct? That was 2008.
The materials I reviewed were 2008, yes.
And Sergeant Asham's testimony was that the New Mexico trip was 2008, correct?
Yes.
And actually that Nichole in 2007 was in a different state. She was in Arizona.
Yes.
So there's no confusing Arizona and New Mexico. So the time frame had to be New Mexico 2008.
That's my understanding, yes.
Thank you. Next topic was statements made by Nichole's family, and the state had brought up some, and asked you some questions regarding alibi witnesses between the hours of that the murder may have occurred, correct?
Yes.
And it's your testimony earlier that Nichole had been at her parents' house somewhere around 11 p.m. on Saturday night to the following Sunday morning, when she was next seen around somewhere around 8 in the morning, around when people wake up.
That sounds right.
And the state had asked you that there was no alibi witness that Ms. Rice could produce during those hours, and you responded in the affirmative. Is that correct?
Correct.
Would it be typical for somebody to have an alibi witness during sleeping hours?
No.
Now, if she left the farm in her car, went to Minot, killed somebody, and came back, do you think there's a high probability that somebody would have saw her, that she might have woken somebody up at the farm?
Yes.
Did that happen in this case?
No.
Is there any evidence whatsoever that you've seen that Nichole went to Minot, killed somebody, and came back to her parents' house, went back to bed on the couch undetected, and went about her day the next day without anybody being the wiser?
No.
Next topic that was brought up were Nichole's interviews. I think that the state had asked you to affirm that there were 5 interviews. Do you remember that?
Yes.
The first interview being June 4th at the crime scene, correct?
Correct.
Now, you testified that you've been around a lot of crime scenes.
Yes.
Can you talk to the court about what goes on at a crime scene?
Crime scenes are it's not like TV. It's not glamorous. It's not exciting. It's a meticulous, painstaking process of first photographing everything, identifying what might be evidence, marking it, photographing it again, collecting it properly, documenting it properly, and then taking it away.
So there's a lot of processing of evidence. Is there a lot of discussion of evidence?
There is.
Okay, and if somebody was brought to the crime scene and they were around that, is it fair to say that they would hear about the circumstances of the crime?
They could, yes.
Now, you're given a lot of hypotheticals by the state, and there are a lot of assumptions made. There was an assumption about if Nichole was in Minot, could she have done this, could she have done that? Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, you reviewed the case, and would you say is it fair to say that there's strong evidence that Devon Hall was in Minot during the time of the murder?
There is.
This may sound like a very basic question. What would you rather rely on if you're an investigator that is recommending charges to law enforcement? Assumptions and hypotheticals or strong concrete evidence?
Strong concrete evidence, of course.
No further questions, Your Honor. Thank you very much, Agent Couns.
Thank you.
Mr. Nelson, do you have any recross?
I do, Your Honor.
Something we haven't heard though, right?
Well, stuff that was brought up on redirect here.
Which was exactly the same stuff we heard on direct and cross, so,
I just need to make sure a few things are clarified.
all right.
Help me understand your timeline. Sounds like you were an active agent as far as with the FBI for roughly 10 years or so, where you were the one that was actually doing investigations.
Let's see, so I started in Sioux Falls in the spring of '97 after the academy, and then I was transferred to Bloomington, Indiana in 2002, and then was there until 2006 when I went to headquarters. So 2006 is when I became more of a pencil pusher.
Okay. So 2006 is when you became a pencil pusher.
Correct. And then I did that for a while. Towards the end of my career, I stepped down and was working surveillance and human source development.
Now, that means that by my math, you haven't been the one responsible for investigations, as least the FBI is concerned, since 2006, which is nearly 20 years ago.
Not as the case agent.
Okay. I was concerned about something you testified to. You said that you were supervising other agents in 2015.
Let's see, from 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10. No, that's incorrect. It's on my CV, whatever the exact years are.
Okay.
That I was
Take
a
a look here.
supervisor.
Well, the problem is that your CV only, at least the CV that I have, just says Federal Bureau of Investigation 1996 through September of 2018. It doesn't include dates.
In 2015, I would have either been working on Special Operations Group, which is mostly surveillance, or developing human sources. So I would have been a field agent at that time again.
Okay. Part of your job being in law enforcement to keep up on changes in case law?
Your Honor, this is beyond the scope of redirect, and it's been addressed.
They asked about what he was doing at the time, and I think it's quite relevant that to his expert opinion on whether or not he kept up with case law.
Your Honor, we didn't bring up case law.
They did not. It's beyond their, it was beyond their redirect.
But it has to do with his job supervising other agents.
You're questioning that he wasn't qualified to supervise other agents? Is that what you're trying to say?
What I'm questioning is experienced law enforcement keep up on case law to make sure that they're doing things the right way and that they don't get things overturned or non-prosecuted, that sort of thing.
Your
What
Honor,
I'm wondering is, if he's supervising other agents in 2015,
Was
why
he not
would...
keeping up on case law? I heard the
Yes.
question.
Yes.
Oh,
Goes to his credibility.
overruled. He can answer the question.
Can you repeat, please?
Sure. So you were supervising other agents around 2015.
Yes. No, I just said that I was either working on Special Operations Group, doing mostly surveillance, or I was working human source development.
Okay. But you weren't keeping up on decisions from the Supreme Court of the United States? As
In
far
those
as
in those
investigations?
roles, I would.
You need to wait till I finish my question.
Go ahead.
You weren't waiting, or excuse me. You weren't keeping up on decisions that came down from the Supreme Court of the United States regarding what you could and could not do in investigations?
Your Honor, I'm going to renew my objection. This is beyond the scope of redirect.
It goes to his training experience, Your Honor.
They had an opportunity
Again,
on cross.
Stop. We've already heard this, Mr. Nelson.
I'll move on, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Now, we've established previously that you were not present or watching online when Detective Barnard testified.
For the fourth time, we've done that.
Yes. So you did not hear Detective Barnard say that he couldn't see the body inside the window either?
No.
Okay. Do you have any reason to doubt that?
Nope.
Based on that, would there be any reason that you would expect that Marty would have seen it either when he threw the curtain and the curtain rod into the window?
I would expect someone to be more curious about why the window is out and look in, yes.
Okay. Detective Barnard was a licensed peace officer for the state of North Dakota, an investigator. Correct?
I will take your word for it.
All right.
yes.
You have no reason to doubt that.
No.
And Marty Annell was not an investigator.
Correct.
You seem to be putting quite a bit of weight on a layperson's interpretation versus a professional's interpretation.
Barnard should have seen it too.
Now, we've established through the redirect there that you were never at the scene on June 4th of 2007.
Nope.
So it's pure speculation that Barnard should have seen her.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you watched that reenactment video, correct?
Yes.
All right.
I don't believe I brought up the reenactment video on redirect, Your Honor.
He did not, Mr. Nelson.
Your Honor, it's more going towards that the room was dark, so it's hard to see.
I didn't bring up the lighting of the room either, Your Honor.
Sustained.
I'll move on, Your Honor. Now, you were present for Detective Carmen Asham's testimony.
Yes.
So you heard that the murder weapon, which you've got the photographs up there, is currently in evidence at the Minot Police Department.
Yes.
And you also heard testimony that the knife that Devon Hall had that was then given back to Jerome Vivier, is also in evidence at the Minot Police Department.
Your Honor, I didn't bring up physical evidence during redirect.
Sustained.
Your Honor, it was brought up about the knife.
Testimony regarding the knife was, and phone recordings were, the physical evidence of the knife and its location were not brought up, Your Honor.
The testimony on redirect was I took it from Jerome's house.
Sustained, Mr. Nelson.
Last time you took Amtrak was 5 years ago, right?
I'm sorry, I was coughing.
I have been coughing a lot myself. I've got it. Feel free to stop by for a cough drop if you need one when we're done here.
I'm good. Thanks.
All right. Last time you took Amtrak was about 5 years ago.
Yes.
All right.
The only time.
The only time? The only time you've ever ridden Amtrak?
It is.
Your Honor, I did not ask any questions about him riding the Amtrak on redirect.
Your Honor, the question on redirect was about Devon Hall taking Amtrak, and then there was speculation from the witness. That's what I'm getting at.
No, overruled. One more time.
I will try again, Your Honor. The file says that Devon Hall made a statement that he slipped the gate guy $20 to ride the Amtrak without getting a ticket. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now you said that you have on redirect that you have no experience doing that.
No.
Slipping 20s? Your Honor, I'd object. That was not brought up on redirect.
That was, Your Honor.
No, that one was. He can answer the question.
So you've never slipped a $20 bill to an Amtrak person to take a ride without getting in the system?
Never.
Okay. Which means, can you testify based on your experience and your knowledge if you could or could not do that?
No.
Okay. So there's no basis for you to know that that's not something you could do?
Nope.
Okay. Defense was asking about proving a negative about the video. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Redirect? But on cross, you admitted that there are statements from the people in the video saying that they were there at that time, 9:20 p.m. on June 3rd.
Yes.
Okay. So there is corroboration for that video.
Yes.
Okay. Now that first interview that Devon Hall did that you just testified on redirect on June 11th, you recall testifying about that?
Yes.
And on my cross, you testified that Hall was, according to the file, drunk and high during that interview.
Yes.
Now, I assume that over the course of 100 or so investigations that you've done as a agent of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, that at a certain point you might have interviewed someone who was drunk and or high or both.
I might have started them. If I determine they're drunk or high, I don't continue the interview.
Why is that?
It's not going to, it's going to have problems and legally later.
You don't think that a person who's drunk or high or both is going to give a solid statement?
They might, but they might not. And if they're not in a state of mind to provide good answers, then I'm going to wait till they're sober if I am aware that they are intoxicated.
So you're aware that Devon Hall was intoxicated on June 11th when he was interviewed?
Yes.
And you're aware that in that interview is when he said that he was in Minot on June 2nd?
Yes.
But you just said that a person in that condition is in no condition to give a statement.
I would not have done it, no.
Okay. So you discount his statement from that day?
I don't discount it. I just would not have done it in the first place.
Okay.
I'm going by by the documents that I was given.
Now, you testified that Devon Hall was a terrible criminal.
I did
is
not.
a terrible criminal.
I did not say that.
I believe that was brought up on redirect, that he keeps getting caught.
Yeah, he keeps
Okay.
getting, I never said anything about him being a terrible criminal.
That might be just my notes. I
Okay.
apologize. I was trying to take notes fast and I might have shorthanded something. He keeps getting caught, doesn't he?
He does.
Do you think if he'd murdered someone that he likely would have been caught?
Possibly.
Okay. That running man that came forward, did he match the description from Becky's description?
Yes.
Okay. In your experience, when people go out for runs, things like that, do they sometimes wear grubby clothes?
I don't think so. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. He might wear old clothes. I don't know about grubby. I don't, what do you mean by grubby?
Okay, you might wear old clothes. It might be stained.
It's possible.
Okay. You're not dressing up for court, say, when you're out for a run at a certain time in the morning.
Correct.
So you're not trying to look your best, necessarily.
Right.
Is there any evidence in the file that Devon Hall was ever on the north side of Minot?
No.
In fact, he said he wasn't on the north side of Minot, didn't he?
On the 11th?
No. Later on when he's interviewed, during the interview at Wolf Point by Detective Goodman, he said
Okay.
he was never on the north side of Minot, didn't he?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you testified that there was no evidence that the defendant came back to the farm. In other words, that she left and came back.
Depends on what you're talking about.
We're talking about the time of the murder here. You testified that there was no evidence that the defendant left the farm and returned to the farm.
Left the farm and returned to the farm?
Yes.
I mean, she went from the farm to the family gathering, to the bar, to the cousin's house, and then back to the... Do you mean back to Minot
Let me
and then
focus
back
you
to
up.
the farm? Okay.
Because this is my understanding of what your testimony was, and correct me if I'm wrong, that your testimony was that there was no evidence the defendant, the morning of the murder, left the farm, went to Minot, and returned to the farm.
Correct.
And the information that there's no evidence from that comes from the defendant's family, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You testified earlier that family has a motive to lie.
Correct.
Your Honor, that's mischaracterization. He testified that families have a motive to lie, not Ms. Rice's family.
The question was, a family has a motive to lie.
Yes, I heard the testimony. Next question, Mr. Nelson.
Those knives that we're talking about here, the knife that actually killed Anita and then the knife that was turned in by Jerome Vivier. You've seen those.
Objection,
Again,
Your Honor.
Mr. Nelson, this goes beyond their redirect.
It does not, Your Honor. During redirect, there was things brought up about the astronomical stuff about the knives.
Not the physical knife, Your Honor.
Not, all right. No, Mr. Nelson. Next question.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Is your expert here by subpoena?
Your Honor, if I may, I have very brief 3 questions.
All right, Mr. Sand, go ahead.
You were asked about family members corroborating the video, but didn't you just state that family members have an inherent bias to lie?
Yes.
Would that be in the case of the video that Nova Westit took regarding the train station?
Yes.
Next question, you testified, or you were asked regarding whether it was likely that Devon Hall would have been caught, correct?
Yes.
Do we know how many crimes Devon Hall has committed that he has not been caught for?
We do not.
Final question regarding the state's question about the farm and the fact that there's no alibi witnesses. Do you recall that?
Yes.
However, you had testified that there is no cell site data regarding Ms. Rice's location, correct?
This is beyond the scope, Your Honor. Objection.
No, keep going. He can answer the question.
There is no cell site data regarding the location of Miss Rice's phone.
Is it fair to say that if she drove to Minot, there might be some cell site data that she went to Minot?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Nelson, one more chance. Anything else?
That cell site information would only be there if she actually had her phone with her. Correct?
You would still have it. It would be stationary for a period of time if she didn't have it with her and was traveling, if that's your point.
So the cell site information only comes from the phone's interaction with the cell towers.
Correct.
So if she left the phone at the farm, the phone would show that the phone was at the farm.
It would, but we'll never know that.
Okay. Now, I do want to clarify something on the video of Devon Hall at the train station on the 3rd of June. That was corroborated by people that are unrelated to Devon Hall, correct? That video took place at that time?
Your Honor, that's not what I brought up. I brought up family
That
members.
was, Your Honor.
We're deep in
No,
this.
he mentioned specifically the family, so I'll let him clarify it. Go ahead, Mr. Nelson.
If you mean unrelated by blood, yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And he's here by subpoena. Is he free to come and go?
Yes, Your Honor.
Any objections, Mr. Nelson?
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Come and go as you please. The witness today, Mr. Sand.
Your Honor, may we approach?
You may. All right, just so we're clear on that, we had a little meeting at the bench here. Mr. Sand, is the state calling another witness?
One brief moment, Your Honor. Thank you very much, Your Honor. The defense rests.
All right. Ms. Sorgan, is the state going to be calling any rebuttal witnesses at this time? And if you need time to think about that, that'd be fine. But if you have an idea now, I would like to know.
I will need a few minutes, Your Honor.
All right, I'll wait. You want to talk about it now or not?
If I could speak with Mr. Nelson and Ms. Asham out in the hallway, I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
Maybe about a 5-minute recess.
Yeah, my thought is that I think I would prefer if we just broke for lunch and then came back at 1 o'clock.
Sure, that sounds great, Judge.
So the time is 11:30. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, again now. Please do not discuss the case. Do not allow anyone to discuss the case with you, and do not use the internet or other electronic technology in any attempt to learn information about this case or communicate with your family, friends, or anyone else about this case. And please do not form nor express any opinion about this case until I have given it to you for your deliberations. I will hope to repeat this instruction at each recess. If I fail to do so, it applies to you throughout the trial. Again, I'm breaking for lunch just because it's fairly close and I'm not sure we want to start into something else. So please come back. We'll start at 1 o'clock precisely. It's my understanding the defense is not going to be calling a particular witness that we had had numerous discussions on, but those discussions were not in front of the jury as far as I know. So the jury has no inkling of your concern with regard to whether that witness is going to be called or not called. So I just wanted to make it clear on the record that the opportunity to call additional witnesses, you have decided not to do that. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
All right. And again, what would happen now would be the rebuttal witnesses, if the state has any, they would like a few moments to do that. My thought is I'd kind of like to know that now because I'd like to go over closing instructions at some point here. We need to do that without the jury being present. So that having been said, I would like to recess us from now 11:33 till 11:45 and then come back and make a decision at that point. So we'll be in recess for 12 minutes. The jury's done till lunch. We're not yet. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.